The Obama administration changing the way that it warns Americans about terror threats in the wake of the San Bernardino attack. The move is being viewed by some as a major shift in strategy after the White House scrapped the post-9/11 coded system and replaced it with the National Terrorism Advisory System, which was never activated. It had a Twitter account that never sent out one single tweet. Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson says this newest change, when they get around to announcing what it's going to be, will address that evolving threat.
And I'll be announcing soon, hopefully, what our new system is that I think reflects the current environment and the current realities. Look, we need a system that adequately informs the public at large, not through news leaks of joint intelligence bulletins to law enforcement, not through leaks from anonymous government officials, but we need a system that informs the public at large what we are seeing.
All right, and we know the president also said that he believes that the terrorist threat has entered a new phase. Clearly, it has. Leslie Marshall, blogger for the Huffington Post, syndicated talk show host and a Fox News contributor. Tom Sullivan is the host of the Tom Sullivan Show on Fox News Radio. Welcome to you both. Leslie, I want to start with you. We were told at the beginning of the Obama administration that essentially the war on terror was over. We're not using that term anymore. We're not fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan. We're working to get out of those entanglements. And this war on terror is over. Clearly, it was not, Leslie. And now we have to return to the posture that we had at the beginning of this administration.
Well, I never agreed with that statement, to be honest, that the war on terror was over, because I think when we look, we've had terrorist attacks in this country since the 1800s and worldwide, going back perhaps to Adam and Eve. But with regard to the alert system, I think because any government has a fluid situation, especially as we're seeing now with terrorism, that we have to have what's most adequate. The color-coded one that's being showed on the screen right now, for a lot of Americans, myself included, was A, confusing, and B, when you go to the airport, it would give us a sense of fear when you would see red, but it didn't really give us specifics as to what does that mean, why is it that color, and what do we do? And I think that's what they're trying to address now, because when they first made the change, as you said, there was nothing on Twitter, nothing on Facebook. So I think what they're looking to do now is in the best interest of not only informing but educating the American people.
They wanted this
in
whole
case of an
concept to
attack.
go away, but sadly, it's quite obvious, Tom, that it has not gone away. It's never gone away, as Leslie points out. And now we're going to have some sort of system to tell us what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I'll pick up where Leslie talked about the fact that that red was fear. I don't think the government will ever put out the most severe run-for-your-life sort of message. I just don't think they will. But this whole thing is a false sense of security for people that rely on the government for everything. In other words, the world's fine, everybody's in good shape, unless the government tells me that it's not. And I'm thinking you need to be responsible for your own situational awareness. You need to be responsible for your own safety. I think this is a false level of security, and it won't do a thing.
You know, it seems to me that the best thing at this point, and this is based on our conversations with, former people from the CIA, FBI, is for people to take responsibility for themselves. And I think, Tom, you're exactly right. But we also have to go to the if you see something, say something model and perhaps ramp it up. I mean, basically, if you see something, Leslie, you must say something. It is your duty to say something. And we saw this in San Bernardino, and I am not trying to point fingers at this neighbor who didn't speak up, because God only knows what they feel at this point. But we have to move to a much more aggressive, assertive posture as citizens when it comes to this stuff, do we not?
You know, yes and no. One of the problems, if we look at what happened in this country after the Paris attacks, there were Muslims being taken, or people who had brown skin or looked Muslim or had an Arab name, etc., taken off planes nearly every day simply for saying, hey, can I sit with my wife from Chicago to D.C. and things like that. What is suspicious? And I think perhaps we need to have an education as to that. As was said earlier on the program with regard to San Bernardino and the tragedy there, if you see something, say something. The problem is nobody saw anything. This was a quiet guy, kept to himself, and did not change his personality at work,
but that they didn't want to offend anybody. The neighbors said that they had suspicions, but that they were afraid to speak up. And my point is that we have to not be afraid to speak up. The FBI quite clearly said the other day, if you bring information to us, we are not going to point the finger at you. We will respect your privacy in that situation. Now, I want to show you what they're doing in France, because we're all very familiar with the instructions that come in airplanes. This is the sad state of affairs, but this is the reality that that we all have to deal with now. So they have now made these graphics that are going to be in transportation centers, showing people, A, the first thing you do, if you can run, run. B, if you cannot run, barricade yourself inside of an office, and they have pictures of people doing just that. They show people do not run at law enforcement. Put your hands up immediately so that you won't be shot at by law enforcement who think that you may be running away from a scene. I mean, Tom, you know, nobody wants to admit this, but this is the world we live in.
Well,
this attack in San Bernardino, I hope I'm wrong, but I doubt very much it's the last.
No, I'm afraid it's not either. But the thing is, the government always has to play to the lowest common denominator. So some of these things may seem a little silly. I'm not against the government doing it. I just don't think it's very effective. But remember, go through this: the shoe bomber, the Unabomber, the Times Square bomber. Now San Bernardino. No, the government did not pick up on this first. So how would they be able to alert us to all of this? And if you want to go back to Martha, I don't think you're old enough, but there was air raid sirens in cities that I grew up in Seattle, and they used to test them every Wednesday at noon.
That's exactly the model, though. I mean, that we need to adapt to the new posture in this country, and we need to. And I think it makes people feel stronger when they've got something they can grab onto. They've got a system. They have ways of protecting themselves, and I think that has to be the way that we're headed in this country. Sadly, but true. Thank you very much. So we'll see what the Homeland Security folks come up with for us when they finally get around to bringing that announcement out. Thanks, you guys. Good to see you.
Jenna
Thank
Lee's
you,
coming
Mark.
out next.